Welcome to Reflecting Light. This podcast is about filling the world with light by exploring myth, ancient texts, scripture, great works of world literature, and the works of artists, past and present, for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And now, here is your host, Mandy Green.
Hello and welcome to Reflecting Light. So nice to be with you. Thank you for your patience with me. I really was trying to record an episode last week, and with all of our wedding festivities, it just did not get done. Life just happens. I'm still just feeling this amazing joy and radiance and happiness clear down to my toes from being able to see the marriage of my first daughter and see this bride and this groom come together and see this new family created. And it really has inspired so many different things in me. And so, yes, the fatigue is real. It's, to your bones, but I think the joy goes far, far deeper. It's that's down to the atomic level of true light and joy and radiance, and just this little moment where you spend all of this time and energy and means to create this magical moment where I feel we really did touch heaven for just a moment. And I love these moments in life where we are able to touch heaven. I felt that way at the very end of my mission, and I wasn't sure I would ever feel that again, but I really did last weekend as I witnessed this event. And so it's really been on my mind what marriage is and why Christ is the bridegroom and what we can learn from this process and from this covenant and some of the things that go along with that. Now, I have to say, right in the face of something so beautiful and so joyful for us, that we have some very dear friends who lost their little 6-year-old son, their only son, and my heart goes out to them. And if you have a prayer, an extra prayer to spare, if you could send it to our good friends, the Ewers, to lift them through this dark valley that they must travel. And that's how life is, isn't it? How we experience death and rebirth over and over again. And if you look at things through the lens of an Egyptian, it's always about death and rebirth. And even in a marriage, you have to let your old life and your old soul and your old ways die in order to clear room for a new path and a new way. But certainly we feel tremendously sad for them and pray that the light that comes from this will outweigh and surpass the sorrow that they now deal with. So looking at marriage, I wanted to talk about how this shows up, maybe just a few of the metaphors that we use. Christ refers to himself as the bridegroom, and that is not lost on me. His titles really matter, and this is one that I think is particularly careful to use and one that he holds very dear. So let's jump into the scriptures. I wanted to go to the first recorded wedding that we have, which is in the book of Genesis, where Elohim causes a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and a rib is taken from his side, and a woman is built. Now, it's interesting to note that in the Hebrew text, the man is formed. Adam is formed like a clay pot. He's formed out of the dust of the earth. Adamah is the Hebrew word for dirt or dust. But the woman is built from the rib or the bone or the side of Adam. And so we have a very different process that takes place in the building of Eve and the forming of Adam. All I can think of is in Moonstruck, the movie where Johnny's brother says that men chase women to get back that piece of this rib, but it actually has a much, much older precedent that comes from ancient Greek when Plato is having this big discussion about what love is and what soulmates are. And it's actually Aristophanes who has this beautiful speech about love. And he says, love is born into every human being. It calls back to the halves of our original nature together. It tries to make one out of two and heal the wound of human nature. Each of us then is a matching half of a human whole, and each of us is always seeking the half that matches him. That is really beautiful, and it actually does have a scriptural precedent. If we continue to read at the end of chapter 2 in Genesis, it says in verse 24, therefore shall leave a man his father and his mother. Now, in Hebrew, the word that's put at the beginning of the sentence is going to be the one that carries the most weight. The first word then is azav, which is to leave or to forsake or to loose, depart from a man, his father and mother. Now, in another vein, just as a side note, this is great evidence for a heavenly mother. Because what other father and mother is Adam to leave or forsake or lose himself from? Well, there's only one at this point, according to the gospel text. I realize there's a lot of other things that go into that, but for the purposes of our discussion today, the important part is that he must first leave. He must forsake or loose that tie from his mother and father and be joined to his wife. Davak, that is the word used there, and it literally means to join, to fuse, to stand close to cling to be deeply attracted to be joined together with, to stick together, to hold fast, to pursue closely. And I think this is a beautiful definition of what it means to leave your home and be joined to each other. And it continues on that they shall become one flesh. The point is that the two halves make a whole. And we do have this ancient Asian idea of the yin and the yang, where these two halves actually make a whole. And when I refer to my daughter Mackenzie and her spouse, people would always ask, do you like him? Yes, I absolutely love him. I feel like he belongs with our family, and we never knew we missed him until we met him. And then you realized he is part of what makes our family a whole, but more importantly, that he is that piece that Mackenzie's been looking for. Going back to Aristophanes, he says, when a person meets that half that is his very own, he exclaims, something wonderful happens. The two are struck from their senses by love, by a sense of belonging to one another, and by desire, and they don't want to be separated from one another, not even for a moment. These are people who finish out their lives together and still cannot say what it is they want from each other. Beautiful sentiments indeed. I know some of you have been married a long time or remain unmarried, may be thinking, well, that's all well and good, Mandy, but what does this mean, right? How does this really, really show up? And I wanted to talk about this idea of the covenantal power of being tied to someone by a covenant. And then I wanted to talk about the Lord as someone who enables that type of relationship. To be betrothed in Hebrew, the word is arash. And if you look at the formation of that word, Hebrew words, each of the letters has a symbolic meaning. If you want to look at it a little bit more mystically. So the aleph is the beginning. It's the first word. It's heaven. It's God. It's the head, the most important, the beginning. And the shin is the second to the last letter, but it also can represent this feminine aspect. It can mean something that's almighty. It represents divine wisdom. It's teeth. It's to consume, to destroy. So you have creation and destruction, which I think also represents a beginning and an end. And in the middle of that, you have a resh, which is the head or the top of the person, what is the highest part of the person, but also what is the most important. It also could mean someone illuminated by fire, the spirit. It initiates or starts something. And so I think there's a lot of beautiful symbolism just in the formation of that word. Is the destruction or the end of your old life, it's consumed, or even that the love is consumed and made this new beginning by this highest, holiest desire that exists within all of us. And regardless of how you associate with it, if it's heteronormative or not, we all feel this powerful pull to be united with someone, to have someone to lean on, to have that other half, to feel like it's not all upon us. And as I was listening to their beautiful vows that they said to each other, it was so powerful for me to look at the ways that each person in love or deciding to commit themselves in love in our time really forms these vows in terms of their gratitude and what's been uncovered in their life as a result of this love. I read that love is a prism that shows you how your light becomes a rainbow or something like that. And I think love can do that for all of us. It breaks apart the light to the sense that we can see more of what we're made of. And perhaps we're able to see that more in the person that we love, who is our other half. And maybe together we have a bigger spectrum of light that comes from that joining or that clinging to each other. Now, how does this show up in religion? Christ calls himself the bridegroom. And I've been thinking so much about what this means to him. Now, I do believe there is an actual bride of Christ. This should come as no surprise to you. A lot of religious texts and many things refer to Christ as the bridegroom for those that he loves. And I have to say that if you are someone who currently doesn't find yourself married or has never been married, I think it's wildly significant that the Lord chooses to name himself as the bridegroom. He's the husband in the covenant relationship who actually makes up for that space in you and in your life. And he is the husband who would supply that need, even if you find yourself without it in this life. Now, we're told that in the next life, things are different. Gosh dang it, I certainly hope so, because the very best women I know find themselves unmarried. And that's how I know we live in the telestial world. That's how I know there's a lot of hell here, because that does not make any sense to me. And so, dear ladies and gentlemen, if you are there, please know that heaven has designed a way through covenant that you can partake of their goodness and of their beauty while you make your way through this life. I love the language in Hosea too. It's just absolutely beautiful. I wanted to share just a little passage there with you. Verse 19, I will betroth you to me forever through all the eternities. We just talked about this word. Here's that same word where he says in verse 19, I will betroth you to me forever, and I will betroth you to me in righteousness, in tzedek, in justice. So according to just laws, in Egypt, this would be ma'at, right? That everything is in accordance with truth. In chesed, or loving kindness, We don't even have a translation for this word. It's the God's loving kindness. It's this never-ending supply of love that fills in all the empty spaces, and mercy. Rachem actually is the root word for womb, like this maternal regard to nourish you and strengthen you and grow you. And it continues on in verse 20, and I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, meaning complete fidelity, and you shall know Yahweh. Through this covenant relationship, you will come to know the Savior because of righteousness and justice and loving kindness and mercy. You will come to know the Lord. Plato argues that we have this desire to know the infinite. And ironically, we look at the things of this world, the finite things, perhaps even in loving relationships, to fill that space of the infinite, but it really can't. And I feel that marriage is one of the ways that we really try to take something and build it into something truly infinite and something that truly fulfills that infinite, beautiful longing we have to be whole, to be godlike, to be one flesh instead of two. So marriage is one of the ways that is expressed, that we can work on this process. And I believe that we can really be refined into something more than we are. Marriage has the ability to make us more than we are. Unfortunately, it also has that ability to make us less than we are. And I think Hosea 2:19 is a wonderful litmus for how we're doing in our loving relationships, marital or not. Are we betrothed or joined to each other in righteousness, justice, loving kindness, and mercy? And perhaps if we're not, that's something we could look at. And of course, please know, in every situation when I talk about these beautiful things, abuse has absolutely no place in here. And if that's the situation you find yourself in, I can't say, in fact, I shouldn't have even said that, but I have to acknowledge that in this world, there is always going to be the imitation of the real thing. There's always going to be something that is the counterfeit. And we learn through our own experience, remember, to prize the good from the evil. And so no lesson here is wasted. No lesson here need be without instruction, and so many things to learn from it. So I don't exactly know how to approach that, but I just want you to know that I acknowledge it. And if you're alone or you find yourself in a different situation, know that I acknowledge that and that heaven acknowledges that. And they will still betroth you to them forever in righteousness and justice and loving kindness and mercy. The last thing I wanted to talk about is this marriage that we read about in John 2. Now, it's not lost on me that the very first sign that John speaks about, Eric Huntsman shows that John shows the Lord through 7 signs or 7 miracles. And the first of those happens at the marriage in Cana. And it's so significant to me that the Lord would use a marriage setting to deliver the first sign in the Gospel of John. Again, we're talking about a new life, a new creation, a new formation. According to Aristophanes, in the original Greek mythology, man had 4 feet, 4 hands, 2 heads, and Zeus was worried he would be overpowered by them, so he cut them in half to lessen their power. And that's why we chase that other half, because we want to be joined again, to be whole. That's how they explain that. But that desire has existed throughout the beginning of time. Clearly, Adam and Eve desired that union. To cling to someone would have that type of connotation. So let's look at John 2. Now on the 3rd day, there was a wedding, a gamos, at Cana in Galilee. The mother of Jesus was there. So we've got a wedding and we have a mother there. Now, I know a lot of people think that this is Christ's wedding. I don't have that point of view at all. To be at this point in his ministry, he would have to be way more developed. And to be a rabbi, you typically have to be married. People are getting married much, much younger at this period of time, usually in their teenage years. There's just so many points that I don't think this is his. But the mother of Jesus was there, and his disciples were also invited to the wedding when the wine ran out. Now, I've racked my brain about why the water is turned into wine and why we don't have wine anymore. And we'll talk about this a little, but I wanted to ask if any of you have any great ideas about this. I'm super interested. I would love to hear your take on this. So if you want to email me, mandybrookgreen@gmail.com, I would love it. So the wine runs out. They're at the wedding feast and they aren't able to finish the celebration. I think this is a great indication of how the world is at the time of Christ, that you want to have this celebration, you want to have the completion of this event, and yet you're lacking something that would complete it. And the Savior is here at this moment. Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." And Jesus said to her, "To me and to you, what is this? My hour has not yet come." Now, there's a lot of speculation about why he would say that. It's interesting that she would ask that of him at this wedding. Again, I have more questions than I have answers about this, so write in if you have any insight. His hour hasn't yet come. It's not time for me to manifest. And yet, the fact that she's requesting it of him, she might know that it is time. And this word woman is an endearment. It's not like a Mr. T, hey, woman. I think it was Rocky 3, where he talks to Adrian like that. I've never been able to get that out of my head. Anyway, getting back to our story, his mother said to the servants, "Whatever he may say to you, do." Thereby were standing 6 stone water jars. Now, these water jars contained 25 to 35 gallons, according to the purification requirements of the Jews, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So you're going to take an absence of something, and he tells them to fill it the best they can, to go as much as you can with what you have. I feel like this is beautiful instruction to all of us. Fill it with what you have. Give it the best you have. Fill it as full as you can with what's there. So they filled them to the brim as far as they were able. They didn't hold back. They didn't skimp. They didn't save. That's also a beautiful sermon on marriage, isn't it? That you give it everything you have. No matter what it is, you're trying to fill it up to the very top. He told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So even after this moment, we don't have any more information about what took place. But the first piece is taken and given to the master or the head of the feast. I think this is a beautiful way of looking at tithing, or a way to give back or giving thanks to the one who provides the feast, the one who is at the head of the feast. If we're talking about Jesus and the family of man. So they took some and went, and when the master of the feast tasted the water that had become wine, not knowing where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, he called the bridegroom. So this is going to be this moment. And he said to him, "Everyone serves the choice wine first. And then when the guests are tipsy, that which is inferior. But you have kept the good wine until this point." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, at Cana in Galilee, and unveiled or manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Well, there's a lot of ways we can look at this. One way of looking at it is being reborn, being born again. Marriage is a new life. We're born through water and the Spirit. But in a mortal sense, we're born with the water and the blood. And this could be a symbol of new life that way. We could look at it in terms of the best is shown at this moment. That the wine, usually the best wine is served at the beginning, and then as people fail to recognize, they use the crappy wine. But in this sense, Christ gives the best to the last. At the moment when he's there, that's what's going to be given at this critical moment in the wedding feast. Another way to look at it is the purification rituals of the Jews, that they were cleansing with water. They were keeping the law of Moses. But it wasn't actually the law of Moses that was going to cleanse them. It was the blood of the Lamb. And so you have this idea of keeping the law as a way to point you to the great and last sacrifices we're taught in the Book of Mormon. And so all of these things that come before, again, the wine that's served before is going to be nothing compared to the wine that's served here at the end of this moment where the Savior shows who he is to his disciples. Another way to look at it is there's 6 jars of water. 6 is the number just short of completion. And again, you've got this law, you've got this purification ritual of water. And here's the Lord taking that 6 of water and turning it into wine. He's the one who will make that final leap from 6 to 7. So many different things. There's ritual, there's marriage. Anciently, covenants were cut, and the man's covenant of his devotion to the Lord was cut when he was circumcised. Again, you never make a covenant. Anciently, you always cut a covenant. But it was said that a woman would cut her covenant on her marriage night, that when she would engage in sexual intercourse, that hymen in her would be broken. She would shed blood, and that was a way she was performing her covenant, that she was cutting that covenant not only with her husband, but with the Lord. And that's also a beautiful symbol of a marriage and how it is really a 3-way promise between both the man and the woman and heaven. If you are married in a temple in the LDS church, you kneel at the altar, but there's this brilliant light that is suspended above you. And that can be such a symbol of heaven's relation to you, of creating this triangle of love, of creating this structure that will hold, that is a way for the two of you to come together as your heavenly parents and eventually become more heavenly. In my state of watching Wedded Bliss and watching these 2 lovebirds find each other and grow through this moment, that I'm most excited about the marriage. I'm most excited about all the things that come before them. And of course, there will be heartache, there will be growth, there will be loss, there will be pain, there will be death and rebirth and death and rebirth. I read once that to love someone is to attend 1,000 funerals of who they used to be. Our relationships are the greatest schools we have of learning about our own true nature and about the nature of the people that we're surrounded with in this life. And I also believe that little slice of heaven that we see when we see truly magical relationships happen and 2 halves of a whole become one. So I wish you spring bliss. Even the world is experiencing this rebirth, this joy. The blossoms came out this week. The tulips are blooming at last. And we see again that from death comes rebirth, comes new life, comes color and joy and life and green and all of those things. And in this week, I wish you all of that joy and life and love. I have a big birthday coming up next week, and I'll be talking to you about the 50 things. I'm turning 50, I know. But you know what? The 40s were great. I have to say, each time I cross over into a new decade, I love it. The 40s were kind of when I just learned to give the world the bird. Not in a horrible way, but just when you stop caring so much about what everybody else thinks. Because the fact is, you're here for you, and you're here to discover your own light, and you're here to learn about yourself. And you're never going to satisfy someone else's view of that. You're here to learn the things you're here to learn. So we'll be talking about the 50 things I've learned from my life so far. I'm trying to do it in year order because, when you're 3, you're probably learning different things than when you're 43. But just a good way to celebrate the amazing gift that life is. And I have to say, I'm so grateful for each of you for listening, for being part of my life, even if I've never met you, even if we've never crossed paths, our souls have met and our spirits are hungering for these same things. And I want to thank you for being part of my life and enriching it and blessing it and allowing me to talk about some of these things that are meaningful that we're all trying to figure out, and the ways we all go about trying to find that pearl that's part of our life. So just wishing you all the best. May you have a lovely spring week. Love and light, my friends.
Thank you for joining us for Reflecting Light with Mandy Green. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a good rating and share it with your friends. And remember, your light makes the world a brighter place. Share it.